The Bahamas has always been a place of wonder with some 700 islands and keys, rich in culture, picturesque views, and each island possessing its own identity and way of life. And while it benefits from sun, sand, and sea, it is also prone to the elements that come with it, like hurricanes. Exactly 10 months ago, Hurricane Dorian made landfall in Abaco and Grand Bahama, ravaging everything in its path. With help from NGOs, government, and in some instances on their own, the people of these islands have started rebuilding in the hopes of restoring the place they call home. Tonight, On the Record presents Abaco Revisited, as we take a deeper look at portions of Abaco 10 months later. The project really pays itself.
Correct.
They set up
At the conference, the school.
As a journalist, I always have to focus on the facts, and sometimes that means going to investigate for myself. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. right here on RTV.
Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, where many Bahamians now find themselves out of work, lagging behind on bills and uncertain about the future as the country gradually reopens, this is not the case for many residents of Abaco. You're watching On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Unfortunately, their narrative is severely different. While many Abaconians have been able to relocate in the aftermath of the storm, there still remains a vast majority that never left or have returned to the island living under very difficult circumstances. The Disaster Management Reconstruction Authority took over the recovery process at the start of the year. Saddled with 2 disaster zones in Abaco and Grand Bahama, the Abaco district had some very unique challenges created by the storm.
The Abaco disaster zone is composed of both mainland Abaco and the Keys. So a primary function of challenges that exists around the Disaster Reconstruction Authority's work in the Abaco disaster zone is logistics. It's basically getting the materials that we need onto the Keys, and take, for instance, one of the major elements, getting debris off of the Key. None of the Keys have debris management sites. The only waste disposal site in the Abacos is located at Snake Key, which is outside of Marsh Harbor. So one of the things that you'd appreciate is that whatever debris is generated as a result of the storm has to be collected, has to be sorted, has to be taken to a debris management site or a temporary debris management site on these islands, and then has to be barged back to mainland Abaco and trucked to one of the debris management sites that the Disaster Reconstruction Authority has established. That by itself is a major element of the challenges that we face.
There were housing issues here long before Dorian.
We've lost a lot of people who are unable to reside in Abaco because their properties were damaged, because they didn't have work, because of a number of reasons. As the Disaster Reconstruction Authorities progress and we get more people coming back into Abaco, we have less places available for them to stay. So housing is a major challenge for the authority.
10 months later, thousands are still without homes. One answer has been the Small Home Repair Program.
The intent behind the Small Home Repair Program is to have the authority assess and direct the works that are needed to be done in these communities. We've had a number of different types of approaches. Take, for instance, in North Abaco, we have an NGO who is providing materials, and the Disaster Reconstruction Authority pays for the labor. We then engage persons from that community to work along with the NGO to provide the labor that is necessary to repair the homes in their community. NGO supplies material, community supplies labor, DRA supplies payment of labor. Programs worked very well in North Abaco. In some of the other areas, we find that the NGOs have been able to come in and bring their own labor to assist with certain elements of the work. The initial phase of the work in a lot of these homes is something called mucking and gutting. We'll go in and we'll take out all of the wet material, all of the demolished material, place it out. A lot of the NGOs were able to bring persons in to do that work along with members of the community. In a lot of instances, along with members of the family, they'd muck and gut. Following that, there would be things like mold treatment and mold prevention. And some of the NGOs have also taken place in teaching members of the community how to actually do this. We're hoping that there can be some microeconomic opportunities from persons learning these new skill sets to be able to actually do this as a course of business post this storm. So we're seeing benefits from that. But for the most part, what the program is about is assessment, providing materials, providing labor, overseeing that the work is done properly, and then closing out the project.
But still, it's only the tip of the iceberg, as many homes remain untouched and vacant since the storm, as many have not returned to the island.
So we have a lot of homes that we've approached and left information with that we want to do assessments on. However, there is nobody there. Some of the neighbors have been able to give us contacts, and we try to track down the persons that way. But if we cannot gain access to the unit, we're unable to progress the work. Our focus has not been so much on the commercial businesses in Marsh Harbor. It's been mostly on residences and community cleanup in particular. The work on the Keys has been somewhat different because the work on the Keys focuses around largely cleanup, but also on restoring normal functions of life on those Keys.
Dorian was about as unusual a storm as they come, and the damage left behind was no less challenging. The electrical infrastructure in the north, central, and most of the Keys gone. 10 months later, 45-foot poles are being replaced. New lines and circuits connected in some major population centers. Yet, there are many homes still unable to receive power.
Our responsibility is reconstructing the line, getting the communities ready. In terms of the homes being able to receive power, they'll have to go through the Ministry of Works, and whatever standards they have to meet, that's going to have to be with them, between them, the electrician, and the Ministry of Works.
Most of the essential services, government buildings, the airport, clinic, and hotels are electrified. And while the COVID-19 pandemic may have frozen the already struggling economy and slowed the delivery of equipment to the island, it wasn't all bad for the BPL restoration teams.
That has helped us in a way where we can put up more work because we had a lot more quiet time, a lot of people off the road. The only thing it has hindered was maybe our materials coming in, and we had no control over that. But the crews are making good progress. We're dealing with right now Murphy and Dundas Town, and when you ride through, you can see people are elated because it gives them hope because power is coming in the area. So you see more people getting their homes ready. It's not something you take lightly, but then also I must give credit to the citizens because even though it's a couple months out after the storm, they're still patient with us. They're still asking the questions, and we're doing our best to accommodate them and best to answer the questions for them.
Some areas have access to power through temporary generation, especially on the Keys.
Right now, they have temporary generation. So that us getting the feeder to the Keys doesn't hinder them from getting electricity. We have the Keys electrified, and most of the people who are ready to receive electricity. In saying that, we have to build a circuit from our mainland, and we have a feeder called the Keys feeder that will take it down to the ferry dock, submarine to the different Keys.
In Treasure Key, another large population center, there is noticeable progress.
We have a line built from the Green Turtle Key Treasure Dock. We have the main line in Treasure Key built, so we're now building the sub-communities around Treasure Key, and hopefully in a little while they'll be up and ready to go.
And with power coming back, it brings new hope.
I've seen a lot of it. Abaco is really getting ready to bounce back. At first, a lot of people had given up, thought that, well, ain't no way we're going to come back to Abaco. But once they've seen the magnitude of work that BPL is doing, once they've seen power in the areas, you can see the people with elation coming, trying to restore their homes, trying to rebuild their homes. And now they have hope that, okay, we can get back into the community.
When we come back, a look at getting back to school in a post-Dorian era. Welcome to On the Record.
Looking for more On the Record? If you miss our Thursday showing at 8 p.m., join us for the re-airing on Friday mornings at 10, and then again each Sunday night at 8:30. Or go to our YouTube channel and catch up on all of our past episodes. And then like our Facebook and Instagram pages for a preview of upcoming shows and get a chance to ask your questions. Just look for On the Record.
Welcome back to On the Record. This segment is brought to you by Executive Printers. When Dorian devastated the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama last September, it not only destroyed homes and killed dozens, if not hundreds of people, it brought a complete disruption to Abaconians' way of life. Everything from government offices, clinics, police stations, gas stations, grocery stores, and schools were no exception to the destruction. My team and I investigated just how close we are to returning to a sense of normalcy in Abaco.
Before Dorian, the Abaco district had 22 schools, 14 of which were public, and 3,500 children filled those classrooms. 500 remained immediately after the storm. Superintendent Dominique Russell and teachers struggled to keep classes going.
Central Abaco Primary, for example, had 832 children, and the school was completely damaged. Treasury Primary was completely damaged with 139 children. Patrick J. Bethel had 600 children, and that saw extensive damages. Those were the three schools that had catastrophic damages. Now, there were other schools that saw damages in the north. Foxtown Primary, we had damages there. Cooperstown Primary, S.E. Boodle. Even in the south, Moores Island, the roof, a lot of leaking there. We did have some schools in the south that, had limited damages, like Cherokee Sound, James A. Pinder. They didn't have as much the damages as the schools in the central and some in the north. And then, of course, our Keys, we saw extensive damages in Hopetown Primary, Guanakee Primary. We also saw damages at Green Turtle Key, Amy Roberts Primary. So we had a lot of issues pertaining to, the physical loss in terms of the structure. Our teachers, our support staff, all lost homes, lost their personal possessions, and so it was catastrophic. We had to evacuate teachers, parents, and children off the island, just for their safety.
Teachers living in the disaster zones were ordered to evacuate, but not everyone left. Those dedicated few, along with teachers in the South and on the Keys, helped to keep school.
Because students were here. Some parents did not leave, and students were here. So in the South, for example, at Cherokee Sound Primary, Miss Lowe and her team, her other teacher, we were so grateful. They were able to start school September 10th, I think it was. This was 9 days after the storm. So she started school in the South. Crossing Rocks started school, and what ended up happening, students in the central area, we had to bus them to Crossing Rocks Primary. And if it was up to that principal, I think she would have taken everybody. She had over 100 children, and they made it work. We also had James A. Pinder. Their numbers increased. In fact, they also got what we call the virtual school. We ended up with high school students who lived in Sandy Point who were there. So Paul Knowles and his team catered to them, and they are generalists. They're not high school teachers, but they did what they needed to do. In the north, Foxtown Primary, that road was actually there's a bridge there, and that was severed. So we couldn't get in, so we didn't know. But the team at Foxtown Primary got together and they had school. In fact, we had a retired teacher, Doris Russell, who started the first classes. She sent pictures, although that school has its damages. At Cooperstown Primary, there was so much damages, but what happened there, Sophia Thompson led that team. They went door to door, found out which children were still there. They, collected all the information. They went around looking for places to see what was available. And We Wisdom Church was available, the community library was available, and they conducted school. They had over 116 children. It was very congested, but they did a good job, I think, with maintaining some form of, some semblance anyway, of normalcy.
And the stories of heroic teachers were far and wide, even in the Keys.
Hopetown Primary, they had a virtual school, even though that's a primary school. They had students in the primary school and high school. And their key was devastated, but the principal and his wife, they were able to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Amy Roberts Primary, the same thing. That principal did not leave. She had an ailing mother-in-law, so they couldn't leave. And they had school there, primary and virtual. I could go on because I think the staff in Abaco did such a wonderful job with ensuring that the children who remained in Abaco got support.
And along came COVID-19, bringing another level of disaster management. In some cases, virtual learning had to happen without the benefit of a functioning power grid.
And we had electricity issues. So those teachers actually, even though we were put on, locked down, they went to the school, they copied the papers, and they put them out and let the parents come and collect them. And so that's what they did during COVID-19. We also had issues in Crossing Rocks with electricity, so those teachers did the same. Morris Island, those teachers did the same. We had teachers actually teaching. I have a video of a teacher teaching in her car, on a Zoom, Miss Carlotta Archer on Zoom, but she's actually teaching children in her car. And so they got together, and we have a WhatsApp group, and so principals were able to share the platforms that worked for them. And the one thing I think worked for us is that some of our smaller schools are multi-grade schools. And so those students were already used to independent learning, so they had skills. And so they could come in the front of a computer at home and be responsible on the devices.
With an estimated 1,200 students now expected to enroll in the next school year, the clock is ticking to complete repairs by September.
A lot of our teachers are excited to come back to Abaco. We're excited particularly because, Central Abaco Primary, for example, looks like a new school, and we're getting a lot of support from various organizations. And so we will have that school outfitted. It will be an example because it will have, for example, wastewater treatment. And when I went and I toured the school, you also saw that it's going to be a little bit more resilient because the hurricane straps that they are putting on, they're actually putting hurricane straps on the inside, connecting the trusses with the concrete. And I thought that was, something different. And so hopefully it will be a model in terms of resilience. So we're excited about that because it's our biggest school. And so speaking to parents, Abaconians want to come home. They are coming home in droves. In fact, we're getting ready to look at the examination period. And every day a parent comes and say, we're here. We want our children to take their exams here instead of having to go back to Nassau because of the funding, the finances involved. And so we have a lot of parents who indicated that they are coming home. And so we expect the numbers will increase. Now, the survey, it was in English, and someone has suggested that we put it in Creole as well because those parents were not able to access the survey. But persons are coming home. We're expecting, to be quite honest, out of the 3,500, that we would have 2,000 children.
In the wider community, there are signs of life in some places. Maxwell's, the largest grocery store on the island, bustles with shoppers on a weekday. A few other businesses like a bank and utility companies have set up here offering services. By comparison, though, there are areas that remain untouched since the storm. The famous waterfront in Marsh Harbor was flattened by Dorian. The debris has been cleared, but all that remains of these well-known hotels and restaurants are foundations. Nothing has happened here, no signs of rebuilding, save a dock that's being reconstructed. This boat that sits conspicuously on the roadside, a haunting reminder of the power of the storm. Two nearby hotels tell two different stories. Regattas remains closed, the damage still visible from the road. The nearby Abaco Beach Hotel is cleaned up, renovated, and has opened. Our request for access and an interview was never acknowledged. This area near the harbor took a beating last September. As the debris was cleared, the reality of the widespread damage could be seen. This is where Jermaine Williams operated Jaden's Barbershop. His entire business was blown away in Dorian. He returned a month after the storm to no physical store, but reopened under a tent with a generator.
It was a little hard, but we gotta start somewhere. So I just put up a tent and just start cutting. So it's feel normal now. It's coming back to normalcy. People are coming back home.
Customers wait in their cars, enduring the elements for haircuts, while work gets underway next door on his new building.
That's my building going up right now. Start from under the tent. Now we get a structure going up. I decided to build back because it's our property, and I don't see we having a next hurricane like that for the rest of my life. So I don't see where a lot of people saying, oh, they ain't building back because hurricane season and this and that. But what I tell them, hurricane season is coming every year. So it don't make a difference that you build today, you build tomorrow, you build next 5 years. By me starting now, I'll be more ahead than a lot of people who start thinking about the hurricane season.
The shutdown brought by COVID-19 set him back a few months, but he's determined, he says, to build bigger and better. Each haircut taking him closer to reopening.
When we come back in tonight's program, a look at the housing crisis and how it's being addressed. Also, what happened to all that debris left behind by the hurricane? Stay with us. We're back right after this. Hello and welcome to On the Record, and a balanced, true and open debate you've been looking for. Thank you for watching On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. This segment is brought to you by Grand Bahama Power. Housing, or a lack thereof, remains one of the major issues in Abaco post-Dorian. The Bahamas Disaster Reconstruction Authorities sought ways to turn this issue around piece by piece. In April of this year, the DRA handed over temporary housing domes in Spring City, Abaco, to 8 families, with another 24 selected families who were off-island at the time. Just recently, the Prime Minister announced a public-private partnership for the development of 46 homes to be given to families in Central Pines. 2 60-acre sites in Marsh Harbor and Wilson City have also been identified for temporary housing. But those projects are still a ways off. And then there is the issue of the debris left behind by the storm. 2 major issues with no quick or easy solutions.
The residents of the Spring City community suffered major losses in the storm. The damage here was widespread. Some of those people are now residents in the controversial Dome City.
I think initially there was a misunderstanding as to who the domes were for. The domes are for the occupants of Spring City who have lost their homes. And to really tell the whole tale, one of the reasons why the domes could not be located on persons' properties because the properties weren't large enough for the dome to fit adjacent to the home. Ultimately, we would love for persons to be able to have a temporary home structure adjacent to their home, so as they rebuild, they can keep an eye on the rebuild. and they can use the services that they're already connected to. Unfortunately, in Spring City, that was unable to be done. So we ended up building a separate site as close to their homes as possible. And so that's how the Spring City Dome community, that was the genesis behind it. I believe that the vast majority of the homes have been issued to persons. Now, I am unsure right now as to how many of the homes are actually occupied. But the homes, the dome homes which are prepared, we have an inventory of persons who we've assessed with social services and who have come into our offices and registered and said, we would like a dome. Particularly, we would like a dome because it's temporary housing. The domes are not intended to be permanent. It's an 18-month assignment for persons to get their permanent housing up and going. But we wanted to be able to offer something that we can have close to your home site and that is suitable as a temporary home.
Janice Lewis lost her Spring City home and evacuated to Nassau to a shelter with her husband. After 6 months of living between Nassau and the U.S., she returned home and moved into this dome earlier this year.
It's comfortable because I didn't have no place to live, and God blessed me with that, and I think it's really comfortable. You know, this is home. It's a house. They gave the key to me. I was so excited. I was happy to see I have somewhere to stay because I didn't have nowhere to go.
She admitted that some portions leak in the rain and they can become pretty hot during the summer, which we experienced during our visit, but she and her husband have done what they could to make it a home.
It was one big room, but we separated to make our own little bedroom, our own little fridge, and our own little sink and everything. It's comfortable. We thank God for that.
Her husband works only a few days to make what he can. With limited funds, they continue to rely on food distribution.
Well, sometimes they give food over there, in the property over there, they're giving food. Like they give grocery, little rice, corned beef, and stuff like that, like oatmeal, water. So every Thursday, they give us thing every Thursday here. Sometimes they give in fruits and vegetables.
She says she still has to repay the loan she took out for the first home, but plans on rebuilding bit by bit.
All that gone, and I have to pay the bank back. And no jobs. Already have a little small foundation going in the back there. I try to do one room.
One room at a time?
Yeah, one room till I get everything done.
A walk around the domes shows there are attempts to make them as close to a home as the space permits. Air conditioning units installed, and even some pets have been introduced to give some semblance of normalcy. Just across the street is the Spring City debris staging site. Some 3 million cubic yards have been hauled away at a cost of $27 million. The Spring City site is the largest in both disaster zones in Abaco and Grand Bahama. This site handles most of the waste. A drive-in reveals mountains of debris, a snapshot of the lives, homes, businesses, and dreams of Abaconians wiped away 10 months ago.
So that one facility there is the recipient of the lion's share of the storm's debris. It is a government-run facility. It is currently operated by a private contractor, which the authority has engaged, along with the coordination and oversight by the Department of Environmental Health Services. So the Disaster Reconstruction Authority is set up to work along with every agency of government. We don't necessarily have all of the expertise. We work along with the specific subject experts to provide us with advice and guidance as to how certain elements of the work needs to be managed and undertaken. At Spring City in particular, we receive all of the debris. In some cases, the debris comes from our community cleanup contractors. So the authority has engaged any number of contractors to go into these areas and take, for instance, on mainland Abaco, in particular in Marsh Harbor, we've cut it into 11 different zones. And we've put contractors into these zones to remove the debris, to sort it, and in some instances to sort it, but in general to pick it up and to cart it into the DMS site. Once it gets to the DMS site, the debris management team then decides where they wish it to go, depending upon what its contents are. If you would have gone to that debris management site, you would have seen that they have a tower. As soon as the trucks come in, The person in the tower assesses, number one, which contractor it is. Number two, how much debris it is based on the load, based on the actual truck size, and what the contents of it are. In the case of the government contractors or the DRA contractors, we then also assess what the quantity of material is, because we track all of this data to determine just how well our contractors are working. At that point, it's then directed to a quadrant of the debris management site. They handle different types of debris, from construction and demolition debris to white waste, which would be things like refrigerators and stoves and washing machines. And so every portion of the debris management site is divided up into these categories. Some of the waste comes in unsorted. As a matter of fact, the lion's share of the debris comes in unsorted. So that would go to a pile, which would then ask the debris management operator to then have to sort it and put it into the specific piles. At a point that we have sufficient debris, equipment's then brought in to actually process it.
The organic waste will be recycled for use on the island. The other waste is to be prepared for export and recycling. At the start, many of the NGOs here spearheaded the cleanup effort. Nowadays, more Abaconians are doing the work.
For the most part, in the initial premise, we had great assistance, and we still do enjoy great assistance from NGOs. We've had NGOs such as Samaritan's Purse who have come in and have done quite a bit of work, in particular on the Keys. And I'm not trying to just isolate them. There are many of them that have come in and have assisted the Bahamas government and the Disaster Reconstruction Authority in this recovery effort. And their assistance was vital. In fact, it was life-saving. Contractors were mobilized from all across the country to help with this. We had contractors coming in from Nassau into Abaco, and we had contractors coming in from Freeport and other parts of the country in our East Grand Bahama site to take over the task of doing the initial clearing, restoring the initial life services, opening roads, clearing home sites, making the communities safe just for the occupants to be able to get in and out of their properties. As we progressed in our efforts, what we focused on is making opportunities available to Abaconians. As a matter of fact, the lion's share of our community cleanup contracts right now are being undertaken by Abaconian contractors. It's a mandate to try to make sure we have opportunities for persons from Abaco to come back home, to work in their communities. And what's vitally important is that the work which is being done in the community is being done by members of the community. This is not an effort where Abaconians are not leading the way or Grand Bahamians are not leading the way. Both of these communities, both of these disaster zones, we're very familiar with hurricane cleanup. There is nothing that's unusual here.
Elbow Key, like the other neighboring keys damaged in the storm, is incapable of keeping the debris on the island. Instead, it is trucked to a temporary staging site and then barged to the mainland. Treasure Key, a popular tourist destination and residential community, was badly battered 10 months ago. The famous Treasure Key Hotel sustained major damage. It has now been demolished and reduced to rubble. Heavy equipment on site hauls off the materials. That debris is being carted off to the debris staging site right in Treasure Key. But little has happened at the Treasure Key Airport. The small airport terminal was badly damaged and remains inoperable. And despite the cleanup, demolitions and debris removal elsewhere, this is what remains of the once busy Treasure Key terminal. We raised this issue with the Disaster Reconstruction Authority.
We are paying attention to Treasure Key Airport. We have demolition work to do at Treasure Key Airport, and the Treasure Key Airport will be provided with a temporary terminal until a permanent terminal has been designed and built. Bringing Treasure Key back is an important element to restoring operations in Abaco. I think that it's important to say that prior to the storm, however, Treasure Keys Airport was not functioning as a mainline airport. The Marsh Harbor Airport has been the focal point of Abaco's air transportation. But we do see importance in Treasure Key. And in trying to restore another air link, Treasure Key would be that air link in Abaco.
But already there are reasons for concern. The area known as The Farm is home to a local Haitian population. The Treasure Key debris staging site now borders that community. As we drove into the site, signs of new construction, a community, another shantytown well established and thriving.
One of the things that I think everybody has to take account of is that in order for that community to be regularized, for those persons who have come in and have documents, and even for those persons who don't have documentation, they have to take up a real stake. They have to stop, they need to start renting and living and adapting to the lifestyle of the community in which they're part of. They are an essential part of the reconstruction effort in terms of the labor that they provide and the skill sets that they bring. And they have been a major part of agricultural pursuits in Abaco for many years. I think it's unrealistic for us to believe that their presence in Abaco is going to be something that's going to be corrected overnight. What's important for us to do is to be able to make housing available that is proper, that has good, safe, reliable services, and that is a part of the community of Abaco. If we don't address the housing situation, we'll continue to have a situation of shanties popping up, which will require us to have to use other government services to combat that. So a part of what needs to happen is we need to provide more housing, and we need to invite them to join the community.
The modern Pigeon P became the home of a large number of Haitians and even some Bahamians. Dorian destroyed those communities, leaving a trail of death and destruction. All that remains, a chain-link fence around the large open space at the center of Marsh Harbor. But where are the survivors? And what is to be done to address the immigrant housing problem now made worse by the destruction of a major shanty town?
So there isn't a particular immigrant housing plan. There is an overall housing plan. We're not building immigrant housing communities. That's not a part of what the authority's mandate is. We are building housing communities. So the authority would have released RFP, or rather it was a pre-qualification for contractors. We invited contractors to come in and to offer and join with the government in the development of subdivisions in Abaco. Outside of that, we are also looking for ways how we can assist homeowners and apartment owners to bring the inventory of available housing up in the central Abaco Marsh Harbor area. It's vital at this juncture as more and more persons return to have more housing available. The only way that we can build Marsh Harbor back is to have the skills and the persons and the resources available back at home. That's the key to the whole restoration of those communities.
At the debris staging site in Hopetown on Elbow Key, a similar problem is brewing. The old Elbow Key Club is being used in part for immigrant housing, it seems, with hurricane debris salvaged for shelters. In Treasure Key, the grounds around a Haitian church have become a tent city of sorts. From what we were able to find out, the church is helping to feed the people camped out here, and fresh water is being provided by an NGO. I was told Haitians living here have come from all over. The destruction of the shanty towns in Marsh Harbor, no doubt contributing to this setup.
The tent situation is a very challenging one for the authority. It's our intent, and it's our desire, and it's our mandate to get people out of tents as soon as we can. You know, a tent is definitely a recreational type of accommodation. A tent is not intended to be something that forms the place where you live for extended periods of time. So we've had great assistance from NGOs with assisting us with offering sanitary accommodations. And for the most part, tent occupants have portable generators to provide power. But it's a very hard life. It's not easy to live in a tent. It's not easy for persons who are able-bodied. So older persons and younger persons, it would be particularly challenging for. So it is the authorities' mandate, intent, and desire to get persons out of tents as soon as possible. And that's one of the reasons why the temporary housing program things such as domes have actually been one of the solutions that we're offering. Take, for instance, in East Grand Bahama, we're now establishing temporary housing communities with container homes. The container homes which have been donated are coming to East Grand Bahama. We've identified sites for them, and we're now setting up container home communities so that we can get the persons who are in that portion of the disaster zone into safer housing. We're now in the hurricane season. It's impossible for a tent to be able to withstand any sort of hurricane or even any sort of tropical storm. We have reacted to this, and we are immediately addressing this with these communities being constructed right now.
When we come back, we go back to Hopetown, Abaco for an update from that key, where we also found out that the future of the iconic lighthouse remains uncertain. That and a lot more when On the Record continues.
Matt, where in the world is Matt Lauer? Where in the world is Ellison Greenslade? Answer these about the low value of cottage in Atlanta. So we can talk about
On the Record tonight, the government's purchase of the Grand Botine is a hot subject in the news. This is On the Record. Thank you for staying with us. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer, and this is our final segment. On this edition of our show, we decided to visit one of the keys hardest hit by last September's Dorian. Here's a look at what we found on Elbow Key, home of the world-renowned Hopetown.
The 7:30 ferry heads from Marsh Harbour over to Hopetown. On board, passengers pack in. There's standing room only. These are the construction workers who flock to Elbow Key and other areas to assist in the rebuilding. Each stop, workers disembark, headed off to any number of construction sites.
Now that we've cleared the debris, we need men and women to help us rebuild. It's going to take a lot of people.
The presence of so much construction had some health implications. With the island's only clinic still not operational, a homeowner offered a space for a temporary clinic. Donated solar panels helped to power this clinic. 2 workers were treated here the day before our visit. But there is still so much work to be done. Government buildings need to be restored. Boats need to be removed. Second homeowners are driving a lot of it.
In fact, without the help of our second homeowners and the nonprofit organizations that have stepped up, we wouldn't be where we're at. It's because of our many friends who are also invested in our island. I mean, our economy, as I mentioned before, is made up of various components. Our second homeowners are part of that because when they rent their homes, those people come out and they go to our restaurants, they go to our gift shops, they rent our boats, they rent snorkel equipment, they go on snorkeling trips. So the rental home, second homeowner component is integral to. We also have there were 5 small resorts. So we're all about small and boutique, low volume, and the assistance from those groups, we wouldn't be where we are without them.
Each key has its own culture, has its own particular unique challenges. One of the things that I think at this juncture I have to really highlight is the involvement of local government in Abaco. In particular, we cannot do our work without the involvement of local government. Local government is tremendously important to the work that we do. And we've seen that in particular on the Keys. They have the connects, they have the ability to speak the language and translate what we wish to get done. And it's a vital part of the recovery.
The iconic Hopetown Lodge no longer exists as we knew it. The structure was so badly damaged it could not be repaired and had to be demolished, leaving only the foundation. It's a mainstay for the island's tourism.
Yes, the Hopetown Harbor Lodge, which was completely annihilated in the storm, so it's being taken down, and we look forward to somebody purchasing the property and building us a brand new hotel rental cottage property there. I mean, that was our anchor property in the historic settlement, and we look forward and welcome somebody to come and buy it, and let's rise up better than before.
76-year-old Roy Cash left Hopetown 5 days after Hurricane Dorian. His home, built in the mid-1800s, was all but demolished in the strong winds and sea surge.
It would have been okay, mostly, but that house just across the street, it had a big, high wraparound deck, which blew off and slammed into my house, busted a big hole in it, you know. Then, of course, all the wind and rain and stuff got in. So we analyzed that situation, and we decided it was better to take it right down than try and repair it. Unfortunately, we did have insurance, which most people did it, but me and my wife, we sacrificed to have that.
After making his way to the U.S., he and his wife and pets hopped across several states, staying with family. A few months ago, he returned to the Key, hoping to move back into a rebuilt home by December. With the help of Samaritan's Purse, a global charitable group, and his son, the elderly Elbow Key resident says he's thrilled to see what his new home is looking like.
I'm very happy to what's going on. This group, Samaritan's Purse, they've been wonderful. I mean, they get not everything, but they're on the ball.
A few doors down, Vernon Malone operates a convenience store. His home at the end of the street was also wiped out in the storm.
My home was destroyed by 3 other buildings coming up against it, and was completely flattened. And my son lost his house for the same reason, and several other people lost their houses because other buildings came up against it. The hurricane really didn't destroy it. It was the buildings from other lots of land that came up and forced itself, and then the surge of the tide just took it down.
While business is back to normal, unlike Cash, no work has started to rebuild Malone's home.
Because we're waiting for one of the NGOs to come and help me rebuild it. I've had a promise of helping to be rebuilt.
Yet he is pleased with the progress made here in 10 months since the storm.
You cannot describe in words what Hopetown, even this street where we're standing, was under 5 feet of debris. So all of that had to be removed even before you could get any kind of vehicle or anything through town to, and there were buildings across the street. There were mountains of debris just everywhere. You can look at the lots that, you know, that are vacant now and imagine that a house used to be there, but now it's gone, you know, and all the debris is gone. So Samaritan's Purse was a godsend to this island, that they came and moved all of this stuff and created small mountains of debris on the south end and the north end of the island. So they did a tremendous job, but it's hard. Words can't describe what Hopetown was like after that hurricane.
For the most part, we've gotten our debris out of here. So now, in conjunction with all the debris removal, we're rebuilding. And it's going to take some time. So really the island is a bit of a construction site from north to south, bulldozers, trucks, lumber, containers, everything everywhere. At the same time, we're working to beautify the island so that, the Minister of Tourism has opened the island July 1st for tourism. We're not really ready because, for one thing, the lighthouse isn't safe to be open, and we got a lot of work to do. We welcome our second homeowners who need to get to their properties to help us rebuild. And so we're kind of in a phase where, in an odd sense, COVID, while it's awful, has helped us because we're not getting a flux of tourists that would. This area is too rugged for a novice tourist right now. We have a lot of work to do, and we're working very hard, but it's going to take time.
Hopetown features the last operational kerosene-fueled lighthouse in the world. It was built in 1862 and became operational 2 years later. Its striped horizontal red and white design is a welcoming sight into the Hopetown Harbour. World-renowned, its light can be seen from 23 nautical miles away. Although it sustained significant damage in Hurricane Dorian, residents were able to get it relit just 10 days later on September 11th. Structurally, it is sound.
We know the structure is sound. There's a few problems.
It's the last kerosene-burning lighthouse of its kind.
All the technology is original, very simple. They basically pressurize the pressure tank up to 80 pounds in each one. They use one night, one the next night. That way they maintain that both stay in working order. This is where they fill the kerosene in it. They open the valves when they're ready to start it. It pressurizes the kerosene up to the mantle.
It still requires actual manpower to keep the lights on each night and has to be cranked every 2 hours.
Once the keeper comes, we'll go look. He's going to crank this weight all the way up. And then just like a grandfather clock, as the weights drop, the mechanism spins. And so once the weights come all the way back down, which is every 2 hours, he's got to crank the mechanism again 427 times. So that combination with the kerosene, we're the only light out of 18,000 in the world that still operates this way. Yeah, so it's special and we need help.
You said this is floating.
On a bed, in here is mercury.
There's a mercury bath underneath that it floats on.
That it floats on. And as those weights drop, they're synchronized.
The tower itself had a lot of broken glass. The upper door that you went out of on the gallery, that blew in, so there was a lot of salt and sand and water that got on all the brass mechanisms, which still needs to be cleaned up. We were lucky that we had replaced the weather glass when we did, because had that been compromised, the whole tower would have been destroyed.
And while it's functional, at issue is the damage to the outer buildings which help to support the overall operations.
The keeper's quarters, primary keeper's quarters, was totally damaged and had to be totally gutted, and we're in the process of trying to rebuild that so he can move back into his home with his family. The assistant keeper's home we had been working on prior to the storm, so we had a place for him to go, which was good. Generator, we don't have a generator. We've just acquired one, so we're looking to get that hooked up so that we can get the light station at least powered back up temporarily. And the gift shop where our money comes from tourism, was gutted as well because the shutters gave in and the roof had roof damage. So we're working on trying to get that back up and running, and tourism is our mainstay as far as funding this restoration.
A favorite with tourists, there is a growing concern that the current state of the lighthouse will not lend to outside visitors.
The lighthouse is critically important to our economy. It's one of 4 components of our economy. Our economy is based on our beautiful people, our natural resources, our lighthouse, and our storybook village. And if any one of those components drops out, we don't have a tourism economy. Minister D'Aguilar is opening the country July 1st to tourism. This light station is not safe for tourists. So God forbid tourists come, they can't come on property. They're going to leave the Bahamas upset because they want to come see this majestic queen, which is on our $10 bill. The whole country's proud of it. It is the last lighthouse of its kind on the whole planet that is kerosene burning and hand cranked. And right now, if you pan your camera over, there's a 30-foot drop. We have no fence. It's not safe. We have no dock. We have, the Ministry of Tourism has reached out to us. For that, we're very grateful. They have sent an assistance of $10,000. To make the light station safe, we need $200,000. So we're asking Mr. Prime Minister Minnis and Deputy Prime Minister Turnquest, please, we cannot get going without your assistance.
While Abaco and its keys may not be where they were pre-Dorian, one thing is for certain: there is some progress that has been made in ensuring it is restored to its former beauty. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's episode for On the Record Abaco Revisited. Special thanks to all of my team, especially my production and technical staff, as well as all the residents that allowed us to interview them. Thank you as well to you, our viewers. Be sure and stay up to date with the latest news and information on this network, Our News Nightly and Our News Bahamas on Facebook. We'll see you next time, same place, same time, right here on The Record.